Let's get to the news. All right, let's get to the news in Indianapolis, where as it stands right now, after the Browns made their decision, there is only one quarterback battle still left, and that is the one in New Orleans, because the one today in Indianapolis went the direction that I think a lot of us kind of sort of figured it was going. It is not Anthony Richardson, the number 4 overall pick at one point just 3 years ago. It is now Daniel Jones, the former number 6 overall pick for the New York Giants, who signed an affordable $14 million contract. Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback. And it opens up a lot of questions. Number one, is it over for Anthony Richardson? Number two, does someone try to trade for Anthony Richardson? Number three, is this Daniel Jones' job for the entire season? And number four, what does it do for the locker room? I found it interesting today that another former top 10 pick, Quenton Nelson, a guy that will be a consideration one of these days for Canton, Ohio, had this to say.
I would say so. I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. You look around the league and see just like the consistency of having like Patrick Mahomes or like a quarterback behind you that's like been the franchise player for years and years and years, and getting to build that chemistry with that quarterback year after year is something that there is an advantage to when it comes to O-line play. So to answer your question, yeah.
To answer your question, yeah, Frank, it is frustrating because there are plenty of teams that have gone on a quarterback carousel. Few, however, have spun that carousel like the Colts.
I mean, yeah, especially since the night Andrew Luck retired. We all remember that. And this one is tough because, boy, they swung big and just missed completely, it seems like. Now, I look, is it over for Anthony Richardson? No. I fully expect him to start games for the Colts this year just because I honestly don't think Daniel Jones is going to hold that job for 17 games. Like, I don't think Daniel Jones is that good to just pencil him in the whole season. I think at some point, Anthony Richardson gets another shot. But, part of me says Anthony Richardson should have just got the job. Like, give him the job. Let him start more than 15 games for your franchise before you make this big decision. You understand why Daniel Jones gets this job. Shane Steichen is on the hot seat. Chris Ballard is on the hot seat. Daniel Jones runs the offense better right now. The ceiling of the Indianapolis Colts is much lower with Daniel Jones as quarterback. Don't get it wrong. But go back to that first preseason game. And I would guess anyway that this play stuck in their heads when they made this decision. Anthony Richardson doesn't know where the rush is coming from his right. Every single former quarterback has broken down that play. We've all seen it by now where he had two guys open to the right. He should have hit the hot. He didn't even see it. He looked to his left. And in some point, Shane Steichen has to be saying, I can't trust my coaching future with this guy who can't read this play. And that's right. Kind of where Anthony Richardson is. It's hard. It stinks for Anthony Richardson, who is basically being given up on when he was a long-term project to begin with. But the Colts found themselves in a position where they just didn't have time to wait for him to get better.
Yeah. And, Frank, I'm glad you pointed out that play because really on one side of the fence, you're going to have people who say, wait a minute, when they drafted him, all we heard was super raw coming out of Florida, needs a lot of time. This is going to be years, developing him as a project. So what are you doing now pulling this plug when wasn't this supposed to be part of the process going through this pain? It was, but the problem was Anthony Richardson was not progressing on quarterback 101 things. Okay. And that was a big deal. And I'm glad that we had sound from Quenton Nelson because something happened early in this training camp that should have made everyone stop and go, uh-oh, this is a problem. The offensive line had to meet with Anthony Richardson at one point early on in training camp to talk about getting his cadence down consistent. That is crazy to be dealing with that 3 years into a player's career, especially when you're talking about offensive linemen who have been with him for those 3 years. A lineman on the level of a Quenton Nelson should not have to go to Anthony Richardson and say, listen, man, your cadence it's not consistent and it creates problems where there are going to be false starts. There's just going to be pre-snap penalties if we cannot get this cadence down. And that was early in camp. And I thought to myself, I'm like, if you're still working on cadence with this guy, what have you really learned in 3 years? Because that is such a basic thing that quarterbacks start to work on, early on as rookies. And you should really have that down once you're entering into your second year in the league. Whether or not you've been the full-time starter or not, you can still work on that cadence with the line. And, so I think when you get to year 3, he's once again missing blitz protections at the line where he should know who the free blitzer is, who the hot read is on that play, and he gets injured. And I think about the cadence issues. I just stare at Anthony Richardson and I say, okay, it's year 3 now. What can legitimately the staff sit down and map it out and say, here's how much he's learned, here's how far we have to go. I think it's such an immense distance to the other shore with him. You had to go to Daniel Jones at this point just to see if you can win games and develop other players on the roster.
And
I'll
Charles,
be
one real
fascinated
quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
One real quick thought on this is, it is, when we take a step back and look at it, it didn't seem so in the moment, but right now it's insane that they drafted him 4th overall. What's the difference between him and Joe Milton, really? Like, I mean, they're both kind of the same player, right? One went in the 6th round where he has no pressure on him whatsoever to develop. If he comes along, great. That's where Anthony Richardson should have gone. And I don't think that a pick like this is going to happen again for a long, long time. This pick happened because everybody's like, oh, Josh Allen was inaccurate in college. We'll figure it out. Like, and it's just a guy with 13 starts in college who had the issues he did. No amount of, because if you could guarantee a guy, okay, we'll give you 6 years to play and figure this all out, cool, but that's not realistic in the NFL anymore. No staff has that. No team has that. It just isn't going to happen.
You can't. Josh Allen's an interesting parallel. I almost think it's a Trey Lance parallel. Trey Lance was really only a 1-year starter at North Dakota State.
Right.
There was the COVID year in there as well. Anthony Richardson, and I did some deep digging earlier today, not that deep, just over a cup of coffee, started 13 games. We know that at Florida. He has started now only 15 games. He had the benching last year. We've had multiple injuries as well. So he has started in his football career outside of high school 28 games. In comparison, of all the quarterbacks who were drafted this past April, only one of them started fewer games just in college, and that was Kyle McCord, who played at 2 big-time programs at a high level at both Ohio State and at Syracuse. Dylan Gabriel started 63 college games. Laugh all you want. That experience means something. Shedeur Sanders started 50 college games. That experience means something. If you're going to develop them, you got to develop them. But you can't take Quenton Nelson and a huddle full of grown men and say this guy who isn't ready is now going to be thrown in there and lead you through your prime years when your clock on your football mortality is ticking.
And that's the thing, too. Josh Allen, who we talk about, he had played football, right? He played at Wyoming. He was a starter for more than 1 year at Wyoming. Now, there was a lot of raw ability there to develop, but he had played football. The Trey Lance parallel is perfect. It really is. And I think when you now look at Richardson and you say, where does this guy go from here? I think
I'd try to trade for him. I would. I'd call the Colts up and say, I'll give you 30 cents on the dollar. I don't think they would do it. Do you?
But see, here's the thing, Andrew. Are you trading? Is it the same thing as the Trey Lance situation where the Dallas Cowboys send a 4th, right, for Trey Lance? Almost immediately when they got their hands on him, they were like, Cooper Rush is going to end up being our backup through the rest of this guy's contract.
We overpaid.
Like we overpaid. Trey Lance is never going to be better than a 3rd quarterback for us, and we'll play him in some exhibition games, and maybe we can get some interest that way. And then it just never really developed. Now Trey Lance goes into the LA Chargers. He's with a coach in Jim Harbaugh and a general manager and Joe Ortiz. Harbaugh, an offensive coordinator, and Greg Roman. Remember, Harbaugh and Greg Roman were together when they salvaged Alex Smith's career, which really effectively Alex Smith did not get himself into a starting spot and secured for 6 years. It took 6 years for Alex Smith really to get it down, but it happened under Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. If I'm Anthony Richardson, I'm his agent, I'm sitting there going, okay, it's probably not going to be here. What do we want? We want like a Sam Darnold situation where we can go somewhere and get a reboot. Maybe it's, remember Sam Darnold went through Kyle Shanahan before he got to Kevin O'Connell. And that's 2 guys I definitely would want to have their hands on my quarterback, but hopefully to have Anthony Richardson, not even in a backup spot, put him in a third string spot, say, look, we're starting over from scratch here. We're tearing it down to the studs, and we're going to just teach and learn football from a basic level. You got a long runway to go. The physical traits aren't going anywhere. Let's just do this from the ground up. And it has happened. People will forget Drew Brees got benched in the third year of his career in San Diego. He had effectively lost that job, got it back that season, and showed enough to take over the starting position moving forward. We talked about Alex Smith, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. There are other guys out there that have had reclamations happen in their career, including, by the way, Baker Mayfield, who went through a multitude of teams before he settled down in Tampa. It can happen. He just needs to make the right decision here, and a team needs to make the right decision when they acquire him and say, this is a guy who's on our back burner. Tell the fan base it's a project. He's our third quarterback, and we'll work with him.
Is there anything at all to be said about maybe the Colts kind of did him wrong a little bit in that when you draft a guy like this, you can't give him 15 starts and pull the plug. You got to say, look, we know it's going to be tough, but we're going to give him the full. He's got a 5-year contract, basically, with the option. We're going to see this thing through. To pull the plug after 2 years, it's just kind of, it's almost disingenuous a little bit, because you knew it wasn't going to happen within 2 years, especially when he missed 19 games due to injury. I started 15. I just wonder if they should have saw this through a little bit. I don't think any of us disagree that Daniel Jones isn't the answer, right? I don't think that's the case.
I asked both of you guys, when he tapped himself out of the game, don't you think the Colts were knocked off their axis there? Yeah, that's what I felt like. I felt like that was the moment that changed everything in the org.
Charles, I have asked active players and former players, at least a dozen of them in the last year. Just somehow it's come up in conversation at a restaurant, on a field, wherever. That question: have you ever seen that happen at any level? A quarterback say, "I'm tired," and in plus territory go, "I'm out," and they said, "Never, ever." Now, I've had some come back and go, but give the kid a break. Like, I'm willing to show him grace, and after he learned his lesson, I'd welcome him back, right? I'm not going to ruin the kid's career. I'm not going to say it's over for him. Like, I'm going to wrap my arms around him as a veteran and still try to bring him back in the fold. That's good, right? That's showing empathy. I totally get it. But no one's ever seen it before, and it's hard to truly come back for. And it goes back, Frank, to your point, like, do you deserve more games? Yeah, but this isn't a developmental league. And so for a coach, a GM,
but that's why they shouldn't have made that pick. That's why you can't make that pick and say, well, it's not developmental.
It's not the NBA.
It's hard. It's yes.
Right. That was an NBA draft pick. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
We're going to take a traits guy at the top of the draft over a guy with production in college football who we're not really sure if he has all the traits, but he's a winner and he produced so on and so. But we're going to take a traits guy. You look at the NBA draft. We're taking some kid from Europe we've never heard of, and he's 17 years old, but he's got a crazy wingspan. He could jump out of the gym, and we're going to project his traits and say in 3 years he'll be fine. Okay, great, but there's no D-League in the NFL. And when it comes to the quarterback, the most important position on the field, you just can't do it. Daniel Jones, by the way, for the record, has won a playoff game on the road, for what it's worth.
Andrew.
Yes, Charles.
There is a D League for the NFL. It's college football. So he should have just stayed.
Correct.
He should have just stayed another year. That's and by the way, that's the downfall of the NFL too. The NFL has an advisory committee, right? That tells you where you're going to be drafted. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate that the same advisory committee doesn't go to a player and go, hey, yeah, you know what? You're a first round pick, but we want you to know, based on our knowledge and where you are at in your career in college, we would advise you to go back to college and develop yourself so that you don't come on to the NFL stage and get forced into a bad situation as a quarterback and have the franchise potentially ruin your career. Don't just advise them on where their draft positioning is. Advise them on whether or not they have enough experience, particularly at the quarterback position, to enter onto an NFL experience with what is going to be likely a bad franchise and be put into a spot similar to Anthony Richardson and a number of other quarterbacks. Bryce Young walking into the Carolina Panthers situation and getting so mentally fried that he had to be sat down just to reboot mentally, which thankfully for the Carolina Panthers worked. But that was a guy with a ton of experience at the highest level program in college. Think about that.
Plenty of quarterbacks over the years have gone back. I remember Matt Leinart went back when everyone said he was ready. He wasn't ready to leave college. He wanted to enjoy it. Good for him. Speaking of the Colts, Zach Kiefer's got a great piece in The Athletic today about Andrew Luck, who could have come out. He went back to Stanford, wanted to stay with his guys. Obviously, that's a much different story. He would have been ready, but he went back to college. Drew Aller, probably was getting his name called opening night of the draft this year on
Arch
Thursday.
Manning.
Arch
Right?
Manning. I
Yep.
was just going to say, yeah.
Exactly. Drew Aller went back to school. And I think most people would say from a football perspective was probably the right thing. And now he gets thrown into a very crowded quarterback class next year. But my head hurts. I do not want to look at the quarterback class next year yet. Let's look at the old quarterbacks